Introduction. Good evening, and welcome. Take a moment to settle in. Let your shoulders drop, your jaw unclench, and your breathing find a slower, softer rhythm. Tonight, we will drift back in time, far back, to a world where the rhythms of life and death were woven closer together than most of us could imagine now. Imagine yourself standing in the chill dawn of a medieval village or town, the mist clinging low to the ground, dampening the wooden fences and earthen paths. You are here to follow the life of a person whose work was hidden in plain sight, whose daily tasks kept the living safe from the dead, or so they hoped. Tonight, we'll wander gently through the days, tasks, and quiet burdens of a medieval grave. As we move through this journey, we will pause at the edges of burial grounds, listen to the muffled thud of shovels meeting earth, and feel the solemn weight that pressed on the shoulders of those who lived at the crossroads of the living and the departed. May this story carry you softly towards rest, as you drift among the distant echoes of history. Segment 1, Part 1, Dawn and the First Spade, if you will, the grey hush before dawn in a small medieval village. The sky is heavy with lingering mist, and the first fragile birdsong carries across the empty lanes, brushing against shuttered cottages and thatched roofs like a whispered greeting. Most villagers remain bundled beneath causewall blankets, huddled against the chill that seeps through wattle and daub walls. But for you, the Gravedigger, the day must begin before the sun's first warmth creeps across the land. Your small dwelling, if you can call it that, leans wearily against the edge of the churchyard. It is not much more than 4 rough walls of timber and deep, patched over the years with whatever scraps could be, scavenged old boards from a collapsed barn, bits of stone straw stuffed into cracks to keep the worst of the wind at bay. A single pallet of straw serves as your bed. Above it, bunches of dried herbs hang from the beams, their earthy scent mingling with the smell of damp that always lingers this close to the ground. You stir awake before the cock crows. Your breath fogs the air as you pull on a coarse wool tunic, thick hose, and a threadbare cloak that once belonged to another laborer, perhaps a mason, long since buried in the same yard. U10. Boots are pulled on next, leather cracked and stiff. These must last through mud, frost, and the constant assault of grave soil that clings to every seam. You step outside, and the cold air greets you like an old companion. The graveyard is still. Rows of mounds and tilted crosses stand in patient silence. Some graves are marked by carved stones, though the words grow faint with each passing season, softened by wind and rain, until only a family or the priest might remember who lies beneath. Others bear nothing at all, lonely, the gentle swell of earth betraying the body below. In the distance, the stone church looms over the graveyard like a guardian. Its modest tower wears a cloak of moss, the bell inside waiting to toll when the priest calls the villagers to prayer, baptisms, or burials. For now, there is only you and the damp hush of the pre-dawn world. You shoulder your shovel, the handle worn smooth from years of calloused palms. A pickaxe leans against the wall, ready for harder ground sometimes needed when winter freezes the soil as hard as iron. A battered lantern swings from your hand, its flickering tallow candle barely holding back the shadows. Your first task lies marked by a plain wooden stake driven into the ground. A fresh grave is needed today. Perhaps it is for a child lost to fever, or an elder whose body finally surrendered to age's unrelenting pull. Perhaps it is for one of the unlucky ones, claimed by the pestilence that sometimes creeps back into the village like an unwelcome ghost. You do not always know the names. Sometimes you prefer not to. You reach the marked spot and pause, letting your eyes adjust to the dim light. The soil is dark here, rich with centuries of churned earth and secrets returned to the ground. You take a moment to push aside fallen leaves and brittle twigs. It is always best to clear the surface before the digging begins. It is a small courtesy to the dead, or perhaps to yourself, a quiet ritual that steadies your mind for the work ahead. With a firm push, the shovel bites into the earth. The first spadeful is always heavier than you remember. A clump of soil lifts free, its scent rising a mingling of cold clay and the faint sweetness of decay. Worms and beetles writhe, caught momentarily in your lantern's flickering glow before they burrow deeper, seeking the undisturbed dark. The rhythm comes slowly, but it comes. The scrape of metal, the muffled thud of soil landing on the growing mound beside you. These sounds form the heartbeat of your trade. The work is physical, relentless, yet there is a certain comfort in its predictability. Each grave must be dug to the right depth, deep enough to keep scavengers at bay, foxes and dogs that roam the village edges, sniffing out shallow rest. You pause sometimes to roll your shoulders, to shift your grip on the shovel handle. The cold seeps through your boots, into your bones, but you pay it little mind. A gravedigger learns early, that the earth shows no mercy to hurried hands. Dig too fast, and the walls collapse inward. Dig too shallow, and the priest scolds you for tempting the restless dead. Overhead the mist begins to lift, unveiling the brittle branches of the churchyard's ancient yew trees. Their roots twist deep into the soil, threading around coffins, long forgotten, drinking from the same ground that now clings to your boots. Some say these trees hold the souls of the dead, their shadows cast like guardians across the graves. In the distance, the village begins to stir. A distant bark of a dog, the creak of a cottage door, a child's sleepy cry carried on the breeze. You remain at your task, mostly unseen. The villagers know you, of course, but they do not often stop to greet you. They whisper instead, half prayers, half superstitions crossing themselves when they pass you on the narrow lanes. To touch the gravedigger, they say, is to invite death to look your way. You do not mind. Their fear grants you a peculiar sort of privacy. Sometimes, as you dig, you remember the stories your mother once told you by the hearth, long before she joined the countless souls beneath your care. She spoke of revenants restless dead that rise when the burial is done poorly, or when the grave is too shallow, or when sins cling to the body like burrs. You would laugh then, a child's laugh, but now, alone in the misty hush, you cannot help but glance over your shoulder from time to time, half expecting to see a figure standing by the US, watching, waiting. You push the thought aside with another shot. Soil piles high now. Your tunic clings damp to your back. From time to time, you pause to rub your aching palms, the skin roughened by seasons of splinters, and there is no one else to do this work. No apprentice waits in the wings to lighten your load. Young men seek more cheerful trades, tending the fields anything but the graveyard's cold embrace. Yet, for all its solitude, the work is not without its peculiar comforts. You know, the seasons by the soil, Escenther Sprangthor, that makes the earth wet and heavy. The dry crumble of midsummer. You know each stone in the churchyard wall, each hollow where rabbits burrow, each crooked row where graves lean like dozing. It is your realm, your quiet dominion at the edge of the living world. As the first pale rays of dawn slip over the horizon, you pause, leaning on your shovel. The grave is halfway done. You let your eyes wander across the resting place of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of souls. Some were saints in life, others sinners. Some found rest at once. Others, villagers say, needed persuading. You, the gravedigger, stand between their stories and the soil that swallows them. The church bell tolls at last, its deep voice calling the faithful to prayer. You stand a moment longer, listening to the echoes bouncing off stone and grave alike. Then, with a soft grunt, you return to your task. The soil waits. The day stretches long ahead, filled with the steady, ancient rhythm of shovel and earth, life and death, silence and memory. Here, in this small corner of the world, you carry out your quiet craft, and though few thank you, though many shun your shadow, the village rests easier for your labor, an unseen guardian at the threshold, tending the boundary no one else dares to cross. The sun climbs slowly, reluctant to burn away the clinging mist that lingers among the leaning headstones and rough wooden crosses. As light slips through the bare branches of the yews, the graveyard shifts from a world of shadows to one of muted color, greystone mottled with moss-brown earth piled high, your cloak speckled with flecks of soil that will cling to its fabric no matter how often you shake it out. You pause in your digging now and then to straighten your back, rolling stiff shoulders. The grave yawns before you, a raw, rectangular wound in the earth. You have learned, with years of practice, how to keep its sides from caving, how to shape the corners so they do not crumble under the weight of rain or careless feet. Your thoughts drift as the sun crests higher. You watch the small creatures who share your realm, blackbirds that perch on crooked gravestones, pecking for grubs unearthed by your spade. A thin brown mouse darts from under the roots of the yew, freezes when it senses your gaze, then vanishes again into a hidden burrow. You do not mind these tiny visitors. They are reminders that life persists even here, where each plot holds the remnants of what once was. Beyond the low stone wall that marks the churchyard's boundary, the village has fully woken. You catch the scent of bread baking, the distant bray of a mule, the sharp clatter of iron as the blacksmith stokes his forge to life. These sounds reach you soft, as though passing through thick wool, your place here forever, a step removed. Some mornings, a visitor comes, perhaps the priest, wrapped in his heavy robes, murmuring a prayer as he checks that your work is done properly, that each grave aligns with the invisible order only he fully understands. He nods to you, sometimes offering a word of blessing, sometimes nothing at all. You do not expect warmth from him. His mind is with the souls he shepherds, not the hands that tend their final beds. Other times, you see the grieving. They arrive in onesie or twosie, mother in a worn shawl, clutching a single candle or a wilting posy of herbs to lay on a child's mound. They watch you from a distance as you work, eyes ringed red with loss. Some make the sign of the cross when your eyes meet. Some hurry away before you can greet them. You do not take offense. Your closeness to death frightens them more than your face ever could. Today, a young woman stands just beyond the fresh grave you prepare. She is wrapped in a coarse brown cloak, her eyes fixed on the hollow you will carve into the earth. In her arms she cradles a bundle, perhaps a cloth-wrapped loaf, to place for her husband, or a child's favorite toy to send along to the next life. She does not speak, but you feel her questions, her sorrow, resting heavy on your shoulders as you work. When you finish, you step back and nod, a small gesture of respect. She kneels at the grave's edge, head bowed, lips moving in words too soft to catch. You turn away to give her the space you wish you'd been given, once upon a time. Your day does not end with digging alone. In the small outbuilding near your cottage, part shed, part storehouse, you keep what is needed for the next burial. Coarse linen shrouds, scraps of rope for lowering a body gently, handfuls of dry herbs gathered by the women of the village to ward off unpleasant scents. Sometimes the priest blesses these bundles, sprinkling them with holy water, before they are wrapped tight around the departed. You carry a small stack of shrouds back to the church porch, your boots leaving faint prints on the frost-kissed grass. Inside, the air is still and cold, heavy with the faint perfume of incense from yesterday's mass. Candles gutter along the altar. You leave the linen there for the priest to use, when the body is made ready, washed, wrapped, prayed over. Sometimes the family does this themselves, whispering final farewells through trembling lips. You have learned to keep your distance. Grief is not for you to disturb. By midday, you return to the graveyard. The sun stands high, weak though it is, glinting off dewdrops that linger in the hollows between graves. You inspect older plots, noting which headstones lean too far, which mounds have settled too low. It is not enough to dig and forget. The graveyard must be tended, the earth smoothed, the weeds pulled away lest they choke the few flowers the mourners bring. A grave untended is an insult to the living and a risk to your reputation. Too much neglect and people whisper that the spirits grow restless. Too much growth and the dead are forgotten. You kneel beside an old grave now, the name on the stone worn to near nothingness. Lichen crawls across its surface, softening the letters that once proclaimed a merchant's legacy. You tug free the weeds that have taken root at its base, tossing them into a basket for burning later. Each grave you tend reminds you of how stories slip away, how names fade. The living cling to memory with fragile fingers, but, in the end, the earth swallows all, patient and Sometimes you uncover bones. When ground grows crowded in spaces needed for new burials, you are called to exhume what remains of the long dead. It is a delicate task, one that carries a quiet weight. You use smaller tools, then trowels, your own calloused fingers too, ease femurs and skulls from their resting place. The bones are placed in an ossuary, a charnel house near the church wall. There, the remnants of dozens, hundreds, perhaps more, lie stacked together, skull atop skull, bone against bone, stark reminder that death is the great equalizer, grinding away wealth, title, and sin until only a scatter of bone remains. Not all villagers like this. Some protest, frightened of disturbing the sleep of the departed. Others see it as a practical necessity. You understand both sides. The ground can only hold so many. The living must be buried, too, when their time comes. The cycle does not break. It merely circles tighter and tighter until the old bones must make way for the new. Your stomach reminds you of the hour now, rumbling beneath your tunic. You retreat to your small dwelling, stepping inside the dim single room that holds your bed, a rough-hewn bench, and a battered wooden chest. From within, you pull a crust of bread stale but edible, a wedge of hard cheese wrapped in cloth, and a small clay jug of ale brewed by the widow near the well. It is not a feast, but it will do. You chew slowly, your mind still drifting to the grave. You will finish this afternoon, to the fresh shrouds waiting on the church porch, to the damp pile of weeds you will burn before dusk falls. When you step outside again, the village seems brighter. Smoke curls from chimneys. Children chase each other along the muddy lane beyond the church wall, their laughter floating like birdsong across the resting dead. You pause for a moment, your hands resting on the handle of your shovel, and let the sound wash over you. It is a reminder that while you work among the dead, you do so for the living. They may fear you, avoid your shadow, cross themselves as you pass, but in the end, your labor allows their lives to continue undisturbed. With your simple meal finished, you return to the half-dug grave. The soil is softer now, warmed by the pale sun. You slip back into the rhythm shovel, lift, toss. The mound grows higher, the hollow deeper. You know this work by muscle memory alone. Your mind wanders to the stories buried here, the merchant who boasted of distant lands and spices rare, the midwife whose hands welcomed dozens of villagers into life, now resting beneath a crooked yew, the child who never saw a second summer, their secrets, their dreams, their regrets all mingled now with the clay that clings to your boots and coats your calloused palms. In this slow, steady work, you are keeper of those stories, even if you alone remember. And so, the day wears on. By the time the sun edges toward the west, the grave stands ready. You tamp down loose earth around the edges, wipe your brow with your sleeve, and lean back to survey your work. It is neither grand nor humble, just as it must be. A vessel for the departed, a promise to the living that death is not left to chance, but tended with the same quiet care as the fields beyond the village walls. As dusk approaches, you know your tasks are not yet finished. The priest will arrive to bless the grave, to guide the soul onward, to remind those gathered that this is but one step on a longer journey. And you will stand a respectful distance away, your shovel resting against your shoulder, your eyes lowered, a witness to the end, and the one who seals it shut. This is the rhythm you keep, the steady heartbeat of soil and bone, day after day, season after season. Few would choose it, fewer still would last. But for you, it is life, itself a life lived in the hush between the prayers of the living and the silence of the dead. By the time the sun begins its lazy descent toward the line of distant trees, you feel the ache settle deeper in your bones. The midday warmth is already fading, chased away by the evening chill that slips in through every gap between cloak and skin. You stand at the edge of the freshly dug grave, boot heels pressed into the damp earth. The mound beside it rises higher than your knees, dark soil speckled with bits of old root and pale stones that glimmer like teeth in the waning light. There is an odd beauty to this moment of stillness that rests over the churchyard like a blanket. The birds that flitted so boldly at dawn now quiet themselves among the yews, their chirps replaced by the faint rustle of leaves shifting in the wind. You draw your cloak tighter around your shoulders and watch as the priest approaches along the narrow path, his robes brushing the tops of the wild grass that grows just beyond the tended graves. Behind him trails a small group of mourners, their steps slow, faces shadowed beneath woolen hoods and linen veils. A man's low voice carries on the breeze-off sobs from an old woman, or perhaps a mother with a child gone too soon. These sounds are familiar to you, though they always strike somewhere deep, a quiet note in the drumbeat of your daily labor. The priest nods as he nears, acknowledging you without words. You return the gesture, stepping back to give the family room. A wooden cart, pulled by a grey donkey with patient eyes, bears the shrouded body. Simple, linen, bound at the head and feet with twisted rope, hides the shape but cannot disguise its truth. In this moment, the grave becomes more than to the stories buried here. The merchant who boasted of distant lands and spices rare, the midwife whose hands welcomed dozens of villagers into life, now resting beneath a crooked yew, the child who never saw a second summer. Their secrets, their dreams, their regrets all mingled now with the clay that clings to your boots and coats your calloused palms. In this slow, steady work, you are keeper of those stories, even if you alone remember. And so, the day wears on. By the time the sun edges toward the west, the grave stands ready. You tamp down loose earth around the edges, wipe your brow with your sleeve, and lean back to survey your work. It is neither grand nor humble, just as it must be. A vessel for the departed, a promise to the living that death is not left to chance, but tended with the same quiet care as the fields beyond the village walls. As dusk approaches, you know your tasks are not yet finished. The priest will arrive to bless the grave, to guide the soul onward, to remind those gathered that this is but one step on a longer journey. And you will stand a respectful distance away, your shovel resting against your shoulder, your eyes lowered, a witness to the end, and the one who seals it shut. This is the rhythm you keep, the steady heartbeat of soil and bone, day after day, season after season. Few would choose it, fewer still would last. But for you, It is life, itself a life lived in the hush between the prayers of the living and the silence of the dead. By the time the sun begins its lazy descent toward the line of distant trees, you feel the ache settle deeper in your bones. The midday warmth is already fading, chased away by the evening chill that slips in through every gap between cloak and skin. You stand at the edge of the freshly dug grave, boot heels pressed into the damp earth. The mound beside it rises higher than your knees, dark soil speckled with bits of old root and pale stones that glimmer like teeth in the waning light. There is an odd beauty to this moment of stillness that rests over the churchyard like a blanket. The birds that flitted so boldly at dawn now quiet themselves among the yews, their chirps replaced by the faint rustle of leaves shifting in the wind. You draw your cloak tighter around your shoulders and watch as the priest approaches along the narrow path, his robes brushing the tops of the wild grass that grows just beyond the tended graves. Behind him trails a small group of mourners, their steps slow, faces shadowed beneath woolen hoods and linen veils. A man's low voice carries on the breeze-oft sobs from an old woman, or perhaps a mother with a child gone too soon. These sounds are familiar to you, though they always strike somewhere deep, a quiet note in the drumbeat of your daily labor. The priest nods as he nears, acknowledging you without words. You return the gesture, stepping back to give the family room. A wooden cart, pulled by a gray donkey with patient eyes, bears the shrouded body. Simple linen, bound at the head and feet with twisted rope, hides the shape but cannot disguise its truth. In this moment, the grave becomes more than a hole. It becomes a promise that the village will remain clean, that the soul will find its way, that the living can go on without looking back over their shoulders in fear. You stand to the side as they gather around the grave's edge. The priest intones his prayers, the Latin flowing like a low chant, carried through the dusk by a breeze that stirs the few candles brought by the mourners. One flickers, guttering against the cold, but a hand shields the flame until it steadies. You watch all this with a respectful distance, eyes lowered, shovel resting against your shoulder. You are present, but apart, always present, always apart. The prayers come to an end. The family steps forward, one by one, to offer small tokens. A handful of wildflowers, their heads already drooping from the cold, a lock of hair bound in thread, a scrap of parchment bearing words you cannot read, but know must carry the weight of goodbye. You wonder, as you often do, whether the dead notice these gestures, whether they linger here among the mossy stones, grateful for the touch of hands they can no longer feel. When it is time, you step forward again. Two men help you guide the body into its resting place, lowering it with care so the linen does not tear on the rough walls of earth. It lands with a soft, final thuda sound that echoes faintly, swallowed by the soil. One of the mourners, a boy no older than 12, squeezes his eyes shut. You see him cross himself 3 times, lips moving in a prayer you once muttered. As a child yourself, with a nod from the priest, you take up your shovel once more. Each spadeful of earth falls with a muffled sound, like the closing of a door. The mourners stand close at first, heads bowed, eyes locked on the grave's edge as if they might glimpse the soul's passing. But as the mound grows, and the shrouded form disappears beneath the layers of earth, they step back, one by one, until only the priest remains beside you. When the last of the soil is patted down, you take a bundle of fresh straw and lay it gently across the new mound. It will hold the earth in place against the rain that will come tonight or tomorrow. The priest speaks one final prayer, marking the grave with a wooden cross he drives into the ground. Its paint is chipped, its edges rough, but it is enough. It is always enough. The family lingers for a moment longer. They do not speak to you, most never do, but sometimes there is a glance, a nod, a fleeting look of gratitude that flickers like a candle in the wind. You catch the boy's eyes as he turns to leave. He does not flinch. Instead, he lifts his chin, as if to see you clearly, the man who tends the dead so the living may sleep easy. You nod back, a gesture you hope he will remember, even if only as a whisper in the shadows of his dreams. When the mourners fade back along the path, their footsteps swallowed by the deepening dusk, you gather your tools. The priest has returned to the church, his robes a pale ghost drifting through the open doors. The candles inside cast golden shapes against the stained glass, bright halos that flicker across the floor worn smooth by centuries of knees and whispered prayers. You linger at the fresh grave for a while, your hands resting atop the shovel handle, its wood warm where your grip has worn it smooth. You feel the earth settle beneath you, a subtle shifting that reminds you how life and death share the same soil, the same roots. You think, not for the first time, how one day you too will lie beneath a mound like this. Who will dig that grave? Who will lower you gently and pat the soil down with steady hands? Perhaps no one, or perhaps a boy who watched you once in the fading light, learning what it means to stand at the edge and tend the threshold. The wind picks up, stirring the straw, lifting the scent of freshly turned soil and fallen leaves. Somewhere beyond the churchyard wall, you hear the laughter of children chasing each other through muddy lanes. The village lives on, sheltered by the boundary you keep. They do not speak your name at feasts. They do not raise a tankard to your health at the inn. Yet when the pestilence comes, when winter's chill steals the old and the fragile, they will look to you with quiet, fearful relief, and you will stand ready, shovel in hand, guardian of the space between the prayers and the silence that follows. With the last traces of daylight draining from the sky, you gather your tools and turn toward your small dwelling. The graveyard hums with a hush you know well, a lullaby of rustling branches, distant bells, and the steady rhythm of the earth reclaiming its own. You close the gate behind you, the iron latch clicking softly, a promise that the boundary holds. For now, inside your home, you light a single tallow candle. Its small flame dances across the rough walls, flickering shadows that remind you of the mourners gathered by the grave. The boy's wide eyes, the weight of the shovel in your hands. You set your tools by the door, boots heavy with clinging soil. You know they will not be clean come morning. They never are. You draw the cloak tighter around your shoulders as you settle onto your straw pallet. Outside, the wind hums through the churchyard yews, a low whisper that carries the memory of your day's labor. You close your eyes and listen to it, the familiar song of earth and bone, of secrets buried and stories told in the hush between one breath and the next. Sleep comes slowly to a gravedigger, but when it does, it is deep-rooted in the soil you tend, wrapped around the silence you guard. And tomorrow, when the dawn mist rises again, you will step into the chill air once more, shovel in hand, keeper of the threshold that no one else dares to hold. The graveyard at dusk holds a silence that feels thicker than the day's hush. When the sun dips low behind the distant hills, the last threads of gold slip through the branches of the ancient youth, casting long shadows that seem to lean over each grave, touching each mound with soft, fading light. The air cools quickly. Where once the earth was soft and pliable in the midday warmth, now it begins to stiffen again, the damp settling like a chill cloak around your shoulders. You stand at the edge of the graveyard path, shovel resting against a mossy stone wall. From here, you can see nearly every marker, every mound and leaning cross, each telling its own quiet story. There are grand stones for wealthier families, though even those are plain by modern eyes, and simple markers for those who left little behind but the warmth of memory. The wind stirs, rustling the straw you laid over the fresh grave. You linger at the fresh grave for a while, your hands resting atop the shovel handle, its wood warm where your grip has worn it smooth. You feel the earth settle beneath you, a subtle shifting that reminds you how life and death share the same soil, the same roots. You think, not for the first time, how one day you too will lie beneath a mound like this. Who will dig that grave? Who will lower you gently and pat the soil down with steady hands? Perhaps no one, or perhaps a boy who watched you once in the fading light, learning what it means to stand at the edge and tend the threshold. The wind picks up, stirring the straw, lifting the scent of freshly turned soil and fallen leaves. Somewhere beyond the churchyard wall, you hear the laughter of children chasing each other through muddy lanes. The village lives on, sheltered by the boundary you keep. They do not speak your name at feasts. They do not raise a tankard to your health at the inn. Yet when the pestilence comes, when winter's chill steals the old and the fragile, they will look to you with quiet, fearful relief, and you will stand ready, shovel in hand, guardian of the space between the prayers and the silence that follows. With the last traces of daylight draining from the sky, you gather your tools and turn toward your small dwelling. The graveyard hums with a hush you know well, a lullaby of rustling branches, distant bells, and the steady rhythm of the earth reclaiming its own. You close the gate behind you, the iron latch clicking softly, a promise that the boundary holds. For now, inside your home, you light a single tallow candle. Its small flame dances across the rough walls, flickering shadows that remind you of the mourners gathered by the grave. The boy's wide eyes, the weight of the shovel in your hands. You set your tools by the door, boots heavy with clinging soil. You know they will not be clean come morning. They never are. You draw the cloak tighter around your shoulders as you settle onto your straw pallet. Outside, The wind hums through the churchyard yews, a low whisper that carries the memory of your day's labor. You close your eyes and listen to it, the familiar song of earth and bone, of secrets buried and stories told in the hush between one breath and the next. Sleep comes slowly to a gravedigger, but when it does, it is deep-rooted in the soil. You tend, wrapped around the silence, you guard. And tomorrow, when the dawn mist rises again, you will step into the chill air once more, shovel in hand, keeper of the threshold that no one else dares to hold. The graveyard at dusk holds a silence that feels thicker than the day's hush. When the sun dips low behind the distant hills, the last threads of gold slip through the branches of the ancient youth, casting long shadows that seem to lean over each grave, touching each mound with soft, fading light. The air cools quickly. Where once the earth was soft and pliable in the midday warmth, now it begins to stiffen again, the damp settling like a chill cloak around your shoulders. You stand at the edge of the graveyard path, shovel resting against a mossy stone wall. From here, you can see nearly every marker, every mound and leaning cross, each telling its own quiet story. There are grand stones for wealthier families, though even those are plain by modern eyes, and simple markers for those who left little behind but the warmth of memory. The wind stirs, rustling the straw you laid over the fresh grave. You pull your cloak tighter and breathe in the scent of earth, cold now, tinged with the distant smoke of hearth fires drifting over the village rooftops. Your tasks do not always end with the last grave filled. There are small duties that must be done while the light holds. A broken fence to mend along the far wall where rabbits burrow through loose soil. A stone cross to right where the spring thaw left it, listing sideways. You fetch a handful of wooden stakes from your lean-to, each one carved from fallen branches, bark still rough against your palms. It is simple work, pounding them into place with the blunt back of your spade, securing the weak spots along the wall, that mark where the graveyard meets the living world. Somewhere near the edge of the boundary, you pause. There is an old grave here, one you know well. A patch where the grass never quite grows, right? Where the soil sags year after year. No one visits this plot anymore. The family line has ended, or perhaps moved away, taking their memories with them. Yet you remembered, you always do. You stoop to clear away the brittle stems of weeds, pulling them out root and all, so they do not return too soon. It is a small act, but it feels right. An unspoken promise that even the forgotten will not go wholly untended. A sudden rustle startles a blackbird from a nearby stone, its wings beating the air before it vanishes into the gathering dusk. You watch it go, then rest a hand on the cold top of the leaning marker, letting your fingers trace the shallow groove of letters you can no longer read. Names fade, you think, but the earth never forgets. It holds everything, bones and secrets, tears shed at graveside, whispered prayers that drift down through the soil like roots seeking water. You make your rounds slowly, tending the boundary that separates the sleeping from the waking. You check the small ossuary at the far corner, its heavy door creaking on its iron hinges. Inside, the dry hush of stacked skulls and bones greets you like old friends. Each set of hollow sockets once held eyes that gazed at the same sun, the same rolling fields, the same stars overhead. Now they rest here, out of the way, yet always present. A reminder that the past is never quite buried as deep as we believe. Closing the ossuary door, you secure the latch and move back toward your cottage. The graveyard seems to settle with the night, a sigh that drifts up from the soil, easing into sleep along with the living world beyond the stone walls. You pause by the wooden gate, hand resting on its weathered beam. Through the gap, you glimpse the faint glow of lanterns inside the church, where the priest prepares for evening prayers. Somewhere beyond, the warm shapes of cottages cluster together, hearth smoke curling like grey ribbons into the darkening sky. They will gather tonight around their fires, bowls of thin pottage warming cold hands. They will murmur prayers for the departed, prayers for the living, prayers that death stays distant for just a little longer. And you, the gravedigger, will be here, a name whispered only when needed, a shadow at the edge of their memory, the keeper of the line they fear to cross. You step inside your dwelling at last. The candle on your rough table flickers weakly, casting its gentle glow over the simple room. The straw pallet, your battered chest, the small bench, where your tools rest in a neat row. You tug off your boots, caked in soil that will dry and flake onto the floor by morning. You shrug out of your cloak, hanging it on the peg by the door where it will air overnight. Your hands ache from the day's work, nails lined with the stubborn grit of the graveyard's earth. You rub them together, feeling each crack and callus like a familiar map of your trade. For your meal, there is only a scrap of bread left, and a sip of ale to warm your belly before sleep. You chew slowly, the silence of the room pressing close. Not oppressive, but steady, like a blanket laid gently across your shoulders. Outside, the wind rattles, the shudders. The graveyard lies just beyond the walls, its presence a constant companion. You do not fear it. The dead are easier than the living, you've long believed. They do not ask for more than you can give. They do not lie, they do not betray. When the candle gutters low, you stretch out on your straw pallet, pulling a thin blanket over your chest. You listen to the soft hush of the wind through the cracks in the walls, the distant hoot of an owl perched somewhere among the yews. You think of the graves you dug today, the ones you tended, the ones you will tend tomorrow when the sun lifts the mist from the village once again. Your eyes grow heavy as you drift along the edges of sleep. In this place between waking and dreams, you find a strange peace. The peace of the earth that takes everything in its own time, that forgives all wounds, that holds all stories with equal care. You are a gravedigger, and this is your world. The steady rhythm of shovel-in soil, the hush of dusk among the stones, the promise that, for as long as your hands are strong enough to dig, the boundary will hold. And in that simple promise, you sleep. Segment 2, Part 1. When death comes in waves dear, turns colder, now in your mind and you find yourself standing in the same graveyard. But it is not the quiet hush of an ordinary day. The air feels heavier, thick with the scent of too many bodies waiting their turn to slip beneath the soil. The plague does not announce itself with the toll of bells or a priest's proclamation. It comes first as a rumor, carried from the port towns by merchants who look over their shoulders as they speak. It settles into cottages at the edge of the village, creeping from one hearth to the next. By the time the first grave is dug, you know it will not be the last, not for a long while. Imagine yourself, the gravedigger, waking before dawn, as always. But now the usual hush is punctuated by the sound of coughing behind shuttered doors, by the soft cries of mothers whose children lie to still. You shoulder your shovel, but your steps are slower, heavy with the knowing that today's work will multiply by week's end. In the early days, the graves are dug as they always have been, one here, two there, a mother lost to a fever, an elder claimed by a cough that never quite cleared. The villagers stand at a respectful distance while you work, whispering prayers, crossing themselves as they pass. Some slip you a coin or a heel of bread, a small thanks for handling what they dare not touch. You nod your gratitude, though you would rather they keep their distance. Each face could be the next name carved into the church record. But as the days stretch on, the lines grow longer. The stake that marks each new grave shifts closer and closer to the stone wall. When there is no more room near the UC, you mark the next row, the next plot, until the ground begins to feel crowded. You dig until your palms bleed, wrapping strips of linen around the blisters so you can hold the handle without flinching. The soil turns heavy with early autumn rains, a cold, clinging clay that resists every push of your shovel. The wind bites at your ears, but you sweat all the same, the damp hair at your temples plastered to your brow. At first, the priest stands beside you during each burial, intoning the Latin that promises a safe passage for the soul. But soon, even he cannot keep up. There are more dead than prayers to cover them. You see him at dawn, kneeling at the altar with eyes hollow from nights spent sitting with the dying. He blesses you in passing, but his voice cracks, thin as a reed in the wind. Some mornings, a cart creaks up the lane, pulled by a mule whose ribs show through its dull coat. In the back a pair of boys no older than you once were stand guard over linen-wrapped bundles. They will not carry the dead on their shoulders as they once did. Now they slide the shrouded shapes from the cart with averted eyes, laying them gently near your marked stakes. You nod to them, but they do not meet your gaze. They jump when a crow cries from the wall. You do not know each name anymore. There are too many. You work by number now. For graves before midday, 3 more before dusk. You move between plots like a ghost, your shovel striking the earth with mechanical certainty. The pile of soil grows high beside each hollow. It becomes hard to remember which body will fill which grave. You place the simple crosses afterward, the names painted by the priest's hand when he can find the time. The graveyard itself seems to close in. The air grows thick with the scent of freshly turned earth, of straw laid hastily across open plots, of the pungent herbs the villagers sprinkle to keep the worst of the smell at bay. You tie a cloth across your mouth, though you know it will not keep the sickness away. It is more for the comfort of not breathing in the sorrow that hangs over each mound. At night, you return to your cottage, your boots coated in mud that dries and flakes off onto the floor as you tug them free. Your hands ache, joints swollen, knuckles raw. You sleep poorly, if at all. The sound of the shovels striking earth echoes behind your eyelids, even in dreams. You wake before dawn with a taste of clay in your mouth, your bones heavy with fatigue that no sleep can ease. And still, the line grows. Word comes from the neighboring village. They are burying their dead in pits now, wide trenches cut deep into the frozen ground when the frost returns. You stand at your boundary wall and watch the horizon, wondering how soon it will be before the same is true here. Sometimes, in the blue hush of early morning, you find yourself speaking aloud, not to the living, not even to the dead, but to the earth itself. You ask it how many more it will take, how much deeper you must dig before the ground says enough. The wind carries your words away, whispering them through the dry branches overhead. Yet for all this, you do not stop. You cannot. The village depends on you, whether they look you in the eye or not. You are the barrier between the living and the rot that could creep into the streets, into the wells, into the breath of every child asleep beneath a thatched roof. As you stand at the edge of a freshly dug grave lantern flickering in the weak light of dawn, you let your gaze drift across the resting places of so many souls. Neighbors, strangers, the old, the very young. The mounds swell like waves, frozen mid-crest, each one a reminder that life's tide is relentless. And the only thing that holds the line is you, the shovel, and the soil that always welcomes the dead home. When the village's small graveyard can no longer bear the weight of the dead, you stand at its edge, your breath steaming in the early dawn, and look out at the pasture beyond the old stone wall. It is here, in the rough grass and scattered thistles, that you will dig next. It is not consecrated ground, not yet, but the priest has given his blessing. Voice hoarse and cracking as he murmured the Latin words over the fresh-marked boundary. The earth does not care. It welcomes all equally. Peasant, priest, beggar, child. So long as you can find the strength to open it. You begin with a single trench. It feels unnatural at first, a gouge in the pasture wide enough to hold many, deep enough that when you stand at its bottom, the lip of the earth blocks the horizon from view. The first time you climb down, lantern swinging from your belt, you pause to touch the walls you've cut, the raw edges of clay and tangled roots, the thin trickle of cold water that seeps in from the field. Each day, the trench grows longer. You dig alone when you can, though sometimes the village sends a pair of farmhands to help. They stand stiffly beside you, shovels clutched in hands, more used to scythes and plows. Their eyes dart to the bundles waiting in carts nearby, linen-wrapped shapes stiff as the frost that creeps through the grass before dawn. You do not speak much. Words feel too heavy here. Instead, you show them how to wedge boards along the walls to keep the trench from collapsing, how to set planks as walkways so that the earth does not swallow their boots when the rains come. You know the cost of a misstep. Once, years ago, your father slipped when the ground beneath him turned to sludge, the soil sucking at his legs, pulling him down. You do not think of that often, but now, as you balance on the narrow plank at the trench's edge, you feel the memory in your bones. The smell changes with the trench. In the graveyard, each burial is its own quiet moment, the earth disturbed only long enough to cradle one soul. Here, the air hangs thick with a mingled scent of raw clay, rotting straw, and the sweet, cloying trace of bodies that wait longer than they should to be covered. You tie a cloth around your face, soak it in vinegar when you can. It is small comfort against what drifts up from the open trench as you work. At the trench's edge, the priest sometimes stands, clutching his staff in white-knuckled fingers. He mumbles prayers as you lower each body, ropes creaking under the weight. There is no time for careful arrangement, only the small mercy of laying each form side by side, heads aligned as best you can manage. Sometimes a family member comes, standing at the fence line. They do not approach. They weep into their sleeves, whisper a name through cracked lips, and then turn away before you can lift your gaze. The soil here is softer than in the old graveyard, less tangled with roots, but it clings to your boots in heavy clumps. Each shovelful feels the same, dark, cold, and endless. The pile beside the trench grows so high you must clamber over it when you stop to rest, breath misting in the thin winter air. When you stand up there, you see the village spread out before you, rooftops huddled close as if bracing against the plagueis. Breaths. Smoke rises from a few chimneys. The lanes are quieter than you remember. Fewer voices drift across the fields now. Sometimes, You wonder if you might run out of space even here. The thought slips into your mind as you carve another foot of trench, the shovel biting at the earth like a patient, relentless blade. You picture the pasture covered in these long, open wounds, the grass never growing back, the soil always restless with the weight it holds. At night, your sleep is broken by the sound of carts arriving long after sunset, wheels crunching over frost, the low grunt of tired mules. You rise, pull your cloak tight around your shoulders, and meet them at the fence. You help unload the bundles, rough linen shrouds knotted at each end, and place them at the trench S-lip, ready for dawn. The farmhands who once helped grow pale and quiet now, crossing themselves before they leave. Their eyes do not meet yours in the lantern's glow. You know the stories that swirl around these trenches. In the village, they whisper that the dead here do not rest easy, that so many souls laid close together must breed unrest. That when the wind howls across the pasture at night, you can hear voices calling from the open earth. You hear them too, though you know they come from your own mind. The echo of prayers left unfinished, the rustle of straw-wrapped shapes lowered into clay. Yet you do not stop. You cannot. It is not mercy that drives you now, though mercy lives in each careful lowering, each final handful of straw laid over a face you do not see. It is necessity, brutal and unyielding. If you do not dig, if the trench does not grow, the dead will remain among the living, and the plague will feast on more than flesh. And so you move through each day like a shadow, shovel in hand, rope over shoulder, boots caked in mud that dries and cracks but never truly leaves you. You stand at the bottom of the trench, lantern flickering above you, the walls close on either side. You glance up at the strip of sky. Sometimes blue, sometimes gray, sometimes so dark you wonder if the sun will ever return. And you dig. You do not know when it will end. No one does. The priest's voice grows weaker with each burial. The villager's eyes grow hollower, but the earth waits, patient and wide. It does not care how many lie within it. It only waits for your shovel's steady bite, the soft hush of soil falling like the closing of a door. In that endless rhythm, the creak of rope, the scrape of blade against clay, the sigh of wind across the field, you hear the only comfort that remains, that when your strength fails, when your shovel falls from your hands, the same earth you've opened for so many will open for you as well, and you find a strange peace in that promise. Night comes quickly now. The days shorten, as if the sun itself fears to linger over the graveyard's restless soil. By dusk, the pasture beyond the stone wall falls under a shroud of pale mist, drifting low along the open trenches like a living breath. You stand at the edge, shovel in hand, lantern flickering in the gentle wind, and watch as the last cart of the day creaks away down the track. They come at all hours now, not just at dawn or dusk, but deep in the hush of midnight, long after the church bell's final peal fades into the hills. A lone figure knocks at your door, shoulders hunched against the cold, eyes raw from sleepless worry. Sometimes it's the priest, voice rasping with half-finished prayers. Other times, a grieving brother, a weeping wife. Always, they carry the same burden, a body wrapped in cloth, bound with twine to keep the shape from slipping free. You do not turn them away. How could you? This is your duty, as constant as the turning of the earth. You light your lantern, knot your cloak tight around your shoulders, and follow them back to the trench, footsteps muffled by the frost-hardened grass. There, by the pale glow of the flame, you lower each shape into the waiting hollow. A wordless farewell, a handful of straw, the gentle hush of soil as you cover the worst of the sight. In these late hours, when the wind rattles the loose boards of the fence, and owls cry from the yews beyond, your mind begins to stir with thoughts you'd rather not keep. By daylight, you laugh at such things, or would, if you had laughter left to give. But here, alone among the mounds, it is easy to hear what should not be heard. They say the dead cannot speak. The priest insists it, even when he kneels beside the trench, breath fogging in the night, hands trembling over the shape of a child lost too soon. Yet you have heard them, or think you have. Faint rustlings below the boards you lay across the open soil, the soft sigh of air moving where there should be none. You tell yourself it is the wind slipping between the roots, or perhaps the earth settling, closing in around what it now claims as its own. But a part of you wonders, as you stand in the hush, if souls ever truly stay silent. The villagers whisper to you, catch their words when you walk the lane for your meager bread, your boots leaving clods of dried clay along the church path. They murmur that so many bodies laid close together breed unrest, that if you bury the dead without the proper prayers, they cannot find their way to the next world. Some say you must place a stone on the chest to keep the soul from rising. Others swear by a sprig of rosemary tucked into the shroud, the sharp scent strong enough to confuse restless spirits. You listen without comment. You have buried hundreds, perhaps more. You have laid fathers beside sons, mothers beside daughters, strangers alongside kin they never knew. You have placed stones and rosemary and sprigs of you where they asked, though you do not believe the herbs make much difference. The earth holds what it must hold, and the living sphere does not change that truth. Still, you find yourself watching the trench from your cottage window on the nights you cannot sleep. The lantern sits at your feet, a pool of weak gold in the dark, while beyond the wall, the pasture sleeps uneasily. You trace the edge with your eyes, the raw line of clay like a wound in the land. And you listen, for footsteps on the plank, for the scrape of something clawing its way back through the soil, for the sound of a voice you buried days ago calling your name through the hush. Your father used to say that a gravedigger must fear nothing that comes from the ground. The living, he warned, are the ones you should watch, not the dead. The dead are honest, they take and they give in equal measure. But in these plague years, when fear thickens the air more than the mist ever could, you begin to wonder if he was right. You see it in the eyes of the villagers when you pass them by the well. They shrink back, some crossing themselves, others turning away entirely. You do not blame them. To them you are death as servant, the one who lifts the linen, when they cannot bear to look, who carries the shape of their mother, their brother, their child, and lowers it into the waiting dark. They fear you, and a part of you understands, but there is a loneliness in it too, a quiet ache that no prayer, no blessing from the priest can fully ease. So, you speak to the graves instead, not in words that carry beyond your lips, but in a whisper so soft it slips back into your own mind, like water into a well. You ask the same questions, over and over. Are you at peace? Do you forgive the haste with which I work? Will you rest easy here, so close to so many others? There is no reply, of course, only the soft shuffle of soil settling, the creak of boards shifting under the frost. You tell yourself it is enough to do the work well, to dig deep, to bury true, to say what prayers. You remember when the priest is too weary to stand beside you. And yet when the wind howls over the pasture and the trench yawns wide in the flicker of your lantern, S-flame, you hear your father's voice once more, carried on the night air. Fear nothing that comes from the ground. You grip your shovel tighter, its handle slick with the sweat of your palm despite the chill. You draw your cloak closer to your neck, bracing against the cold that seeps through every seam, and you stand at the edge of that trench, eyes drifting over the rows of fresh mounds waiting to be covered by tomorrow's dawn. The voices fade as the sky lightens, replaced by the ordinary hush of the waking world. The cough of a distant rooster, the crackle of a hearth coming to life in a cottage not far from the graveyard wall. You draw a breath deep into your chest, the cold air sharp enough to sting, and you remind yourself, you are not the one to fear. You are only the keeper of the line. And tomorrow, when the carts arrive again, when the villagers avert their eyes and the ropes creak under the weight of another linen-wrapped burden, you will take up your shovel once more. The earth will open, the earth will close, and you will stand between the two, as you always have. It is said that no winter lasts forever, but when the plague clutches your village in its grip, each dawn feels like another weight pressing down, one more shovel of soil laid across your spine. For weeks, you work through frost and sleet, your boots stiff with mud that freezes and cracks like old bark. Your hands blister beneath the linen rags you tie around them, the same cloth you dip in vinegar each night, hoping its sharp sting will keep the sickness at bay. Yet despite your careful rituals, the smell of the trenches seeps into your skin. It curls into your hair, settles under your fingernails, clings to your cloak even after you beat it clean against the stone wall. You stand by the hearth each night, boots drying by the coals, your shoulders aching from the day's dig. Some nights you sleep sitting up, back pressed against the rough boards of your cottage, as if afraid that to lie flat is to mimic the very souls you've lowered into the earth. The carts come less often now. The boys who once watched you unload linen-wrapped shapes no longer trail behind the mule at dawn. Their father lies beneath the new ground too, lost like so many others. You see them sometimes from your fence, trudging through the thawing pasture with scythes on their shoulders instead of ropes for burial. Their eyes still do not meet yours, but they nod. A small, hesitant greeting, the seed of a trust that takes root slowly, like grass over a fresh mound. Inside the church, the priest kneels longer these days, head bowed so low his voice grows hoarse with prayer. You stand at the back sometimes, cloak still damp with soil, hat in your hands as you listen to the Latin drone. The candles sputter in their holders, their smoke curling up to the rafters like fragile ghosts. You find no answers there, but the rhythm of it soothes you, the same way the scrape of your shovel soothes you in the trenches. One repetition to survive the day, another to hold the darkness at bay. When the last trench is closed, you stand at its edge long after the village has drifted back to their cottages and cold hearths. The boards you used to line the walls are stacked neatly to the side. They will serve again someday, as they always do. A few wildflowers poke through the churned soil, defiant in the chill that still lingers. You stoop to touch one with the tip of your finger, a single bloom of pale violet clinging to the edge of so much loss. You do not mark these graves with stones. There are too many. Instead, you hammer wooden stakes, at intervals, each bearing a simple cross carved with your knife. Names fade quickly here, stories even quicker. You carry some of them in your mind. The child whose mother tucked a clay doll into his shroud, the farmer who asked for a sprig of rosemary to ward off dreams, the old woman whose husband lay waiting for her in the churchyard for nearly a decade before she joined him here in the open pasture. You keep these memories like candles in your chest, small flames to light the path when the world feels impossibly dark. They flicker when you pass through the pasture by moonlight, when the wind catches your hair and you think you hear voices rising through the soil, but you do not fear them. They are yours to keep. Your proof that you did not let the world swallow these souls whole without witness. The villagers emerge when the frost finally breaks for good. You see them in small clusters, at the well, at the fields, peering out of doorways they dared not open for so long. They move quietly, voices hushed, as if speaking too loud might summon the carts back again. They meet your eyes a little more often now, some even offering a word of thanks as they pass the graveyard gate. They know, as you do, that your work held the line when the plague threatened to spill into every hearth and heart. You nod in return, though words still feel strange on your tongue after so many days spent in silence among the mounds. In the evenings, you walk the boundary fence, boots leaving prints in the fresh, forgiving mud. You run your hand along the rough timber, feeling each knot and splinter as you pass. The trench is filled now, the soil packed tight, the grass already finding its way through the raw earth in thin, stubborn blades. You pause at the old graveyard's gate, peering at the familiar headstones, the leaning crosses that mark those who went before. The church bell tolls behind you, softer now, calling the villagers to a service that will not be interrupted by the shuffle of burial carts arriving at its door. Inside your cottage, the air feels clearer. The heavy scent of earth still clings to your cloak, your boots, your hair, but the sharp bite of vinegar is gone. You untie your boots slowly, place your tools in a neat row along the bench. Each shovel nick tells a story. Each rope, fray marks another soul lowered gently into the dark. You run your thumb along the handle's smooth grain, remembering the countless days you gripped it until your palms bled. There is an odd comfort in its weight, a familiar friend, as patient as the soil itself. Tonight you will sleep more deeply than you have in weeks. The wind rattles the shutter, but you do not mind. Beyond it, the graves lie quiet. No carts creak up the lane. No figures knock at your door with hollow eyes and trembling hands. The trenches rest beneath the stars, the wildflowers growing slowly, bravely, where the grass has yet to return. Tomorrow, you will tend the stones, repair the fence, pull the weeds that creep around the old markers. Life will return to the graveyard's paths, and to the village beyond. You will nod to the children as they chase each other near the. You will lift your hat to the widow who crosses herself when she passes your gate. And when the next burial comes, as it surely will, in its own season, you will take up your shovel again. The plague may sleep for now, but the earth never does. It waits, patient, open, ready to gather what the living must one day yield. And you, the gravedigger, stand quietly at that threshold, the steady keeper of the line, the witness to endings, the quiet promise that no soul is left untended, no mound forgotten. Segment 3, Part 1. Folk Beliefs, and the Restless Diademogen Yourself. Standing once more in the graveyard, the dawn mist curling low across the mounds, your boots sinking slightly into soil that still remembers last night's rain, you rest a hand on your shovel, its handle warm now from hours of work, and let your eyes wander across the lines of stones and wooden crosses that mark where stories end. Or so the priest says. But in your village, the stories do not always end so neatly. Beneath the quiet hush of the prayers and the scratch of names in the parish book there hums another tale, one whispered beside hearth fires traded over cups of thin ale, spoken in the hush of the washing room where women wrap the newly dead. But sometimes they rise, restless, half dreaming of the world they left behind. The villagers call them many names. Revenants, the returned, the wandering ones. Some say they slip through the graveyard fence at night, their shrouds trailing soil across the lanes. Others swear that if you listen close enough at the yew tree's roots, you will hear a heart still beating, slow and stubborn as the roots that wrap around old bones. As the gravedigger, you carry these stories like pebbles in your pocket. You do not mock them, nor do you feed them with gossip. You simply hold them, not quite believing, not quite doubting. In your trade, caution is worth more than certainty. You remember your father's words, spoken in the hush of your first winter working beside him. A grave dug too shallow is an invitation. A grave dug carelessly is a door left ajar. He taught you to measure depth not just for the scavenging fox or the spring flood, but for the hush it promised to the soul laid within. The deeper the rest, the quieter the sleep. Some graves carry extra signs, laid by trembling hands when the priest's back is turned. A small iron nail tucked into the shroud, a stone pressed gently into the mouth of the departed so they cannot speak when they wake in the dark, a sprig of rosemary at the foot of the grave, not for the living to remember, but to confuse the wandering mind of a restless corpse. You find these offerings when you dig. You hold them up to the pale dawn light, turning the nail between your fingers before setting it back down with quiet respect. There are other stories too, how the newly dead must be laid with their feet facing east, so that when the trumpet calls on the last day, they rise facing the rising sun. How a corpse's eyes must be closed quickly before they fix their gaze on someone they wish to follow into the ground. How a cat must never cross the coffin, for its shadow is said to draw the spirit back into the world, halfway and angry. Some nights, when the wind rattles the shutters of your small cottage, you remember the old tales told by your mother. She spoke of the grave of a miller who cheated his neighbors, buried without coin or prayer. They say he rose, lean and ragged, knocking at doors, until his debts were repaid in fearful offerings left at his mound. Coins pressed into the damp soil, flowers laid with trembling hands. Better to bury a man with the mercy of the living, she said, than to bury him with nothing but his bitterness. You've seen the fear in the villagers' eyes when a body must be moved. Sometimes, in the crowded churchyard, an old grave must yield to make room for the new. You work carefully then, fingers brushing bone from clay with the same tenderness you use to handle a child's toy. The villagers watch from the fence, lips moving in silent prayers that the bones do not wake. You hum to yourself, not a hymn, but the soft tune your father taught you to keep your hands steady. In those moments, you feel the eyes of the old stories on your back, watching to see if you do your work well. And sometimes, the grave tells you its secrets. A coffin lid, half-rotted, 2 splinters, the bones within turned and tangled in a way that makes you pause. A stone pressed so deep into a mouth that you wonder who placed it there and why they feared that particular voice. A nail driven through a shroud at the heart, rust blooming across the cloth like a dark flower. You do not linger over these things. You lay them back gently, fill the earth with care, and mark the mound so that the grass will grow smooth when spring returns. There are those who scoff at these tales. The priest, when he is rested, speaks of them as foolishness, remnants of an age before the holy word was written down and shared. But even he crosses himself sometimes, when the wind whistles low through the yew branches, rattling the loose bones of old burials that the roots refuse to let go. For you, the gravedigger, these stories live side by side with the simple truths of your trade. Soil, rope, shovel, sweat, prayer, yes, when it comes, a whispered wish for peace, for the earth to hold its guests gently and not give them back to the waking world. When you lean your spade against a fresh mound at dusk, you listen for the quiet that follows, a hush so complete that you know. In your bones, the door has closed, the soul is at rest. You carry these small customs into every grave you dig, an extra foot of depth. When the villagers murmur that the departed was a restless soul, a line of stones laid along the base to discourage the foxes that dig where they shouldn't tea. A sprig of herbs tucked into the turned earth. If you feel the prickling at the back of your neck, the sense that the wind is watching you with ancient eyes. In the end, the earth keeps its secrets. The graves settle, the grass grows, the flowers return each spring, and when the villagers pass through the gate, they cross themselves, bow their heads, and hurry on. But you remain, the keeper of the line, the quiet listener for whispers beneath the soil. You do not fear them. You only listen, and the listening is enough. The sun rises slow over the graveyard, its pale warmth filtering through the bony branches of the yew. You stand by a half-finished grave, your breath a ghostly plume in the crisp air, and you feel it, that hush that settles around the living when they work too close to the edge of the other side. The villagers have their signs, ways they believe the restless dead might reveal themselves. A grave that sinks too quickly, a stone that tips or cracks without reason, a sudden patch of earth, always damp, even when the rest of the ground stays dry. They come to you with these tailies, pressing copper coins into your palm, pleading for your steady hands to set things right. You do not laugh, you do not scoff. You nod, wipe the soil from your palms, and promise to tend it well. You've learned to watch for your own signs too. A grave that refuses to hold its shape, the soil collapsing inward, no matter how carefully you shore it. A body that weighs less than it should when lowered, as if some part of it has already wandered off. A flock of crows that circles above a fresh burial, calling in harsh voices when the mourners have gone. These things you note, marking them quietly in your memory as you tamp the soil smooth, your spade scraping against the roots that snake through the clay like old veins. When the folk come for burial, they bring small charms tucked in hidden pockets, simple things. A knotted cord, a bit of iron. You see them slip these tokens under shrouds when they think no one watches. You do not stop them. It is not your place to mock hope, however fragile. Sometimes they ask you outright, will you place this with him, under the head, or at the feet? You take the sprig of rue or the iron nail without question, tucking it into the burial cloth before the final handful of earth falls. In these quiet exchanges, trust passes from trembling hands to your calloused palm, a contract signed in silence. At the church, the priest frowns on such things. Of course, he would rather see a proper prayer and a sprinkling of holy water, not rosemary or nails or stones pressed between the lips of the dead. But when he leaves you alone with the bodies to prepare them for burial, you do what needs to be done. You close each eyelid carefully, folding the lids down with your thumb, until they stay shut. You bind the jaw with cloth, so it does not fall open later and frighten the mourners. You cross the arms if you have time, though not all families wish it. Some fear that crossing the arms traps the soul, forcing it to linger too long at the threshold. There are nights when you patrol the graveyard after the villagers are asleep, lanterns swinging from your stiff fingers as you walk the crooked rows. You watch for fresh claw marks where foxes or dogs might have sniffed out a shallow grave. You kneel to feel the soil for warmth, not because you expect to find it, but because the old stories say, a restless grave is never quite cold. You do not expect to find anything strange, but you check all the same. When storms blow through, fierce winds that rattle the cottage walls and make the graveyard, trees groan like old bones, you stand at the window and watch for flickers of lantern light among the mounds. You tell yourself you would see nothing but shadows playing tricks in the branches, and yet, if you did see something move, you would not run. You would gather your cloak, take up your spade, and step into the rain, not to chase the shadow away, but to stand guard at the fence, a silent promise that the line holds firm no matter how the wind howls. Your father once told you a tale you carry with you still. There was a man, a butcher, mean and tight-fisted, who cheated his neighbors and struck his wife for years. When he died, they buried him in a grave, dug deep and quick. But by the next dawn, the mound had cracked open, a ragged split of raw soil gaping at the edge of the fence. The villagers murmured that his sins made the earth reject him, that he would wander the lanes, until his misdeeds were set right. It was your father who closed that grave again, shoveling until sweat dripped from his brow in the frost's bitter air. He laid a stone over the man's chest, drove an iron spike through the shroud. He told no one but your mother, and you, years later, when the memory became yours to keep. Sometimes, when you stand at the old corner of the graveyard where the butcher lies, you feel the pull of that story. The mound is smooth now, grass grown thick over it like any other, but you press your palm to the ground just the same, listening for the hush that says, he stays. You know you will never outrun these tailies. They cling to your trade like the smell of soil on your boots, or the calluses on your hands. The villagers need them, just as they need you. The stories give shape to their fear, a fear made smaller when it can be named, contained by charms and nails and half-remembered prayers whispered over shrouded faces. In this, you find your own comfort too, not in the truth of ghosts and revenants, for truth is a fragile thing in a world where death sits so close to the hearth. But in the simple ritual of it all, the extra foot of soil, the rosemary tucked in a pocket, the quiet vigil in the night when no one knows you watch, in these small, strange acts, you hold back the darkness a little longer. You keep the boundary whole. You do not speak of it to the priest, nor to the villagers who pass you on the lane, their eyes averted, their voices lowered. But when they sleep, they do so in homes warmed by fires, untroubled by dreams of open graves. And that, for you, is enough. When the plague came, not once, but again and again like a dark tide, the villagers' fear of the restless dead grew as fast as the mounds rose in your graveyard. A single grave might hold a soul steady, they believed, but a trench crowded with dozens, that was something else entirely. You remember the way the carts would roll up the lane in the hush of early morning, the mule's breath misting in the chill air, the driver rest, shoulders hunched as if trying to fold himself away from what lay in the back. You met them at the fence, your shovel resting against your hip, your eyes on the linen shapes that shifted as the wheels bumped over ruts in the frozen track. The villagers avoided your gaze then more than ever. They did not want to see your eyes, the witness to all they feared most. But they pressed bundles into your hands just the same. Small sacks of salt, sprigs of rue and rosemary, scraps of iron that once were hinges or old nails. Tiny offerings meant to keep the dead from growing restless. When laid too close together, you never said no. You tucked each charm into the folds of the shrouds as you could. A sprig near the heart, a pinch of salt at the feet, an iron nail laid across cold hands. You worked quickly, your breath sharp in your chest as you lowered each shape into the trench. Your father's voice echoed behind your ribs. A shallow grave is a door left open. Do it well. Close it tight. In those days, the priest's words wore thin under the weight of so much death. His Latin prayers sounded hollow in the wind, though you still heard the hope buried in them, like coals glowing faint under a pile of ash. Sometimes, he stumbled through the rites, his eyes flicking to the waiting cart, the new graves that had yet to be opened. You did not begrudge him his fatigue. You knew it well. When the priest could not stand beside you, the villagers came instead. A small cluster, heads bent, lips moving around half-remembered charms, and whispered pleas. They circled the trench, hands outstretched over the open earth, voices trembling. Stay in your sleep. Stay where we lay you. Bring no sickness back. They did not linger. When the last word fell quiet, they hurried back down the path, pulling cloaks tight, as if that alone could keep the dead from following. And then it was you, alone with your shovel and the endless soil. You leaned over the trench, breath steaming into the dawn, and set your weight into each cut of the blade. The earth rose in great clumps, the smell of damp clay filling your nose, mixing with the faint sweetness of the straw laid beneath the bodies. It stuck to your boots, your cuffs, your hair. Even when you washed, it stayed under your nails, a thin brown line that no vinegar could scour clean. You came to know each trench like an old story retold again and again. You learned how to brace the walls so they would not collapse when the ground grew soft from rain or thaw. You learned to stack the shrouded dead with care, a rough sort of dignity, when dignity was in short supply. Always you worked as if the villagers' fears were true, as if each soul might rise if given any reason to wake. At night, after the last cart had gone, you would stand by the trench's edge, lantern flickering. You watched your own breath curl into the hush. Sometimes you whispered to the mounds below, "Stay easy, sleep well, trouble us no more." You were not certain if you believed in restless spirits, but you knew you could not doubt the fear that lingered in every mother's, every father's trembling hands as they pressed charms into your palm. The graveyard took on a strange stillness then, not the ordinary hush you knew so well, but a silence that seemed to breathe around you, as if the soil itself waited to see if you would do your work right. A shovel's slip, a grave dug too shallow, a stake misplaced. Any of these might open the door the villagers dreaded most. So you walked the boundary fence each night. You checked the mounds for signs of animals scratching at the earth, your lantern held low to catch the smallest claw mark. You listened for the wind whistling through the yews. Sometimes swearing, you heard a voice, faint as a sigh, drifting up from the trenches you'd only just closed. When the wind rose sharp and cold, you tightened your cloak around your shoulders and pressed your palm to the nearest mound, feeling the soil's quiet weight beneath your hand. You'd murmur the same words you'd spoken since you were a boy. Sleep deep, sleep long, stay. A charm in its own right. One no priest taught you, but that you carried in your blood, and the blisters on your hands. Come dawn, the village woke again, small fires flickering behind shutters, children's laughter still too rare in the lanes. The carts came less often as the pestilence eased its grip, but the villagers did not forget their fear. They crossed themselves when they passed the trench. They turned their faces when you walked the lane, shovel balanced over your shoulder. Some left offerings at the fence, sprigs of herbs, small bundles of straw, a single loaf of bread wrapped in rough cloth. You gathered these gifts quietly, your rough hands gentle as you tucked them beneath the edge of the fresh soil. One more layer between the restless dead and the uneasy sleep of the living. And when you lay in your straw bed at night, boots by the hearth still crusted with the pasture's clay, you reminded yourself, these small acts were more than superstition. They were a promise, the villagers and yours, that you would stand guard, that you would keep the line. And so you did. By now, the seasons have turned once more. The pasture grass grows taller around the old trench, the earth settling with the soft weight of rain and time. Wildflowers push up through the mounds like small promises, white, pale, purple, their roots weaving gently through the soil that holds so many secrets close. You stand at the fence as dusk gathers its shadows around the graveyard. The setting sun casts long slants of gold between the leaning stones, catching the rough grain of crosses you hammered in place months ago. You lean on your spade, the wood warm under your palm where so many years of work have smoothed its handle to silk. You watch the village from here sometimes, the shape of rooftops dark against the falling light, the slow rise of hearth smoke as families gather close for the night. Children chase each other near the well, their laughter carried faintly through the hush that hangs over the churchyard wall. They know you, even if they do not say your name. They watch you from the corners of their eyes when they pass. The man who stands at the edge, who tends what they fear most, yet dare not live without. Your father's lessons linger with you still, murmured in the scrape of your shovel, the hush of your footfalls along the graveyard path. Always close the earth tight, he told you. Watch the mounds, mend the fences, never let the line grow thin. You took these words to heart, and in the long, dark months when the plague made death a daily visitor, they became your anchor, a ritual to steady the soul when your hands could not stop shaking. Some villagers still slip small charms into your palm when they see you. A twist of yarrow tied with red thread, a bent nail wrapped in cloth, a handful of coarse salt. They ask no questions when you take them. They know you will tuck them where they need to go. Beneath a fresh mound among the roots of a leaning yew along the fence where the restless spirits might hover, you do not scoff. These small tokens carry the weight of trust. Fear, yes, but trust too, that you will do what must be done to keep the dead at rest. And you do. You make your rounds each evening, lantern swinging from your hand, the flame a soft eye in the deepening dusk. You pause by the oldest graves, the stones half swallowed by moss and time. You press your palm to the earth, feeling the cold damp under your fingers. You watch the corners for signs of burrowing foxes, their tracks like scattered questions in the mud. You check the trenches, you close when the world was colder and the plague's grip was tight, making sure the grass grows as it should, the mounds unbroken, the boundary hole. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, you hear things you do not tell the priest. A sigh caught on the wind that curls around the old yew trunks, the faint, shifting hush of soil settling in the hush of night, the dream of footsteps where none should tread. You do not fear it, you do not welcome it either. You simply stand guard, as your father did, as you have taught yourself to do when the moon hangs low and the graveyard seems to breathe. The villagers do not see these moments. They see only the steadiness in your eyes when they come to you with their fear, the way you rest your hand on the shovel's blade, nodding as they whisper stories of curses and ghosts and souls that cannot sleep. They see the small ways you promise them safety. A grave dug deep, a charm buried in the folds of linen, a stone placed to sow at the feet of the newly dead. They do not thank you outright, but you feel it in the way they leave a heel of bread at your door, a fresh egg wrapped in straw, a bundle of herbs hung by your latch where the dawn sun catches the dew. Their thanks is quiet, the same way your work is quiet. No trumpets, no songs, just the slow, steady rhythm of earth opening and closing, life turning over its stories to the soil. When you stand at the gate now, the lantern's glow brushing the crooked stones with its warm touch, you remind yourself that this is what it means to hold the line. It is not the grand prayers spoken in the church, nor the carved names that fade in the rain. It is the hush that comes when the earth accepts what it is given. It is the trust the villagers place in your rough hands. It is the promise, unspoken, that no matter what stories cling to the dark, you will keep watch. So you walk the fence one last time, boots brushing the damp grass, the cold creeping into your sleeves. You pause by each grave that carries an old tale, the miller with the restless bones, the child laid with rosemary at his feet, the trench that once held so many lost to the pestilence. You listen for the hush that tells you they sleep. And when the wind answers with only the soft rustle of yew branches, you let your shoulders loosen, your breath slip warm into the chill. The line holds. The village dreams. The dead lie quiet in the cradle of the earth, and you, the gravedigger, carry the stories, fear and hope woven together like roots in the dark, so that those who sleep in their cottages tonight can rest easy, never knowing how thin that boundary truly is. Segment 4, Part 1. The gravedigger, among the living wind. Sun rises, it spills over fields where the living tend their days sheep herded toward new pasture. Bread dough rising on the hearth, children racing through the lanes with their laughter stitched like silver thread through the village hush. And you, the gravedigger, stand just beyond it all, one foot on the trodden path of the living, the other resting in soil that holds their end. It has always been this way. You were a child when you first felt the shift. The way eyes slid past your father in the market. Square how they lowered their voices when you and your mother passed with a basket of stale bread and a heel of cheese. They did not hate him, nor you, but they feared what you carried on your boots. The scent of the grave, the hush of old stories, the closeness to the one thing they tried so hard to keep at arm's length. Now you stand in your father's place, the shovel handle warm against your palm, your shoulders shaped by years of lifting earth, of bracing your back against the slow weight of other people's grief. You walk the lanes when you must, to the well, to the baker's bench, to the old widow who trades you stale ale for the bundle of firewood you gather from fallen branches behind the churchyard wall. And everywhere you go, the hush follows. They greet you, of course. A nod, a quick blessing murmured behind a raised hand. Sometimes a word of thanks tumbles out, unsteady as a child's first steps. Good that you do this work. Good that you keep it proper. You nod in return, never pressing for more. You have learned how much to expect. A loaf left on your doorstep says more than a dozen forced words. You are necessary. They know this, even when they turn their gaze toward the ground rather than your eyes. Without you, the dead would linger where they fell. In bedchambers and barns, in lanes and fields, their restless presence, a threat to the fragile thread of life the villagers hold so dear. You keep that thread from fraying. You gather what death leaves behind and guide it into the hush of the soil. No songs are sung for you. No feasts laid in your honor. But you are paid, if only in coin enough to patch your cloak and mend your boots for another season. Children feel it most. They skirt around you when you walk the lane, pretending not to stare. Sometimes, the bolder ones follow at a distance, giggling behind cupped hands, daring each other to touch the hem of your sleeve. They believe, as their mothers whispered to them by candlelight, that the shadow of the gravedigger brings bad dreams, or worse, that your touch might leave a mark only the restless dead can see. You remember being one of them once, peeking out from behind the stable door as your father trudged home, boots caked in earth, the hush of the grave trailing behind him like a thin mist. You do not resent the distance. You have carved a space for yourself at the village's, the small cottage that leans against the churchyard wall, the neat stack of tools arranged by your door, the patch of earth, where herbs grow strong in the shadow of old stones. This is your realm, where the hush is yours alone, and the living visit only when they must. Still, there are moments when the distance softens. A mother brings you a bowl of broth on a day when your cough rattles in your chest like a shovel striking rock. A child leaves a bundle of kindling by your door, tied with twine so rough it leaves splinters in your palm. The priest claps your shoulder after the funeral of a man whose debts outlived him. No sermon, just the warmth of his hand, the small gift of his eyes, meeting yours without fear. These moments flicker like candlelight against the dark, small, fleeting, but enough to remind you that you are not forgotten. You feel this most in the way they wait for you when death comes. Sudden or slow, violent or gentle. They send word to your door. They trust you to stand at the threshold when they cannot, to guide what must pass into the earth, to whisper the hush that closes the gap between breath and soil. They will never call you kin, you know that. You are something different, a tether that binds the village to its own mortality. To their children, you are a tale told by firelight. Mind your manners. Do not stray near the graveyard fence at night. Do not look too long at the gravedigger's window. And yet, When the hour comes, when the cough deepens, when the breath slows, when the eyes fix on something far beyond the shuttered walls, they light a candle for you all the same. They send for you in the hush before dawn, when the rooster has yet to stir, and you come boots sliding into damp earth, lanterns swinging low at your side, shovel resting across your shoulder. You nod to their trembling hands, accept their coins, their bread, their whispered prayers. You do not ask for more. You have all you need. The earth, the hush, the promise that when they return to their beds, they can sleep, knowing the boundary holds. So you stand at the edge of the graveyard path, eyes drifting over rooftops kissed by the first pale light of day. You watch the smoke curl from chimney pots. You listen for the distant bleat of sheep, the scrape of iron at the blacksmith's forge, the faint ripple of laughter from behind half-open shutters. You stand in the hush between the worlds, the living, the resting, the waiting. This is your place, the shadow they fear, the steadiness they trust, the keeper of the line they dare not cross alone. When the day's work is done, the last mound tamped smooth, the last stone nudged back into place, you walk the boundary of your realm alone. It is a path you know better than the lane that winds to the tavern or the track that curls out to the distant pasture. Here the fence leans in places, patched with rough planks. You split yourself when the old boards gave way to rain and wind. Here, the earth wears the memory of your boots in shallow grooves that never quite vanish, no matter how the grass grows back each spring. You have learned to love this solitude, though you would not have chosen it once. As a boy, you wanted the forge, the clang of hammer and anvil, the bright sparks dancing up like fireflies, or the fields, heavy with wheat that brushed your fingertips as you walked the furrows at your father's side. But the graveyard chose you, as it chose him, and so you learned to tend the hush instead of the plow, to watch the shadows instead of the wheat's golden sway. In the village, voices echo off stone walls and drift out over the well yard. Gossip about who is courting whom, whose harvest came up thin, whose child coughs too much when the cold wind cuts across the thatch. You hear these things when you stand at the edge of the square to trade for a coil of rope or a sack of salt. The words drift over you like mist. You smile if you must, nod when the milleress wife presses a fresh roll into your hand. But you do not linger. You know the moment when the hush slides over their chatter, when they remember who you are, what you carry on your sleeves. Back behind your cottage door, the world turns smaller, quieter. The room smells of earth and tallow smoke. Your boots leave dried clay flakes scattered like breadcrumbs from the threshold to the hearth. The old chest by your pallet holds what you own. A second tunic, a pair of wool socks, a spare knife wrapped in linen to keep the edge keen. On the small table by the window, sprigs of herbs dry in bunches, tied with twine. Rosemary, rue, wild garlic, when you can find it in the hedgerow. You hang them there for the same reason. Villagers tuck them into shrouds, a small, simple promise that the hush stays where it belongs. Sometimes, you light your candle early, letting its glow pool in the space around you like a soft circle of warmth against the dusk, pressing at the wind. You sit by the small fire, your shovel leaned within reach, a habit you never break, though you have never had cause to use it for more than its purpose. Your father did the same. You remember waking as a child, hearing the soft scrape of the blade being cleaned by the ember's glow, the scent of warm iron mingling with wood smoke. You asked him once if he feared what the village feared. He only shook his head. Not fear, Boyrus. Respect. Respect for the earth, for the line, for what waits beyond the fence. That respect is what steadies you when the nights grow long, and the wind claws at the shutters like a begging hand. It keeps you from pressing your ear to the graveyard soil to listen for voices. It keeps your boots planted when the owl's call drifts down from the yew branches, low and mournful like a soul trying to speak. You listen, yes, you always listen, but you do not lean too far over the boundary you tend. And in this distance you find a kind of peace the village will never know. They sleep tangled in each other's warmth, pressing fear into whispered prayers while the wind rattles the latch. You sleep alone, yes, but your fear does not come knocking like theirs. You know its shape too well to let it startle you anymore. When the cough comes to your own chest, you do not bang on the priest's door for extra prayers. When the ache in your spine makes your steps slow, you do not fear the work will fail you. You do what you can, each dawn, shovel blade biting the earth, rope smoothed by the oil of your palms. And if the day comes when your strength falters for good, well, You know the measure of the soil that waits for you. The hush holds no secrets from you now. On your rounds, you sometimes paused by your father's grave. No grand stone, just a marker carved with his name, and the year the earth took him back. The grass grows thick there, tufts of moss climbing the base where your shadow falls. You rest your hand on the top edge, fingertips brushing the old cuts in the wood. You think of how he taught you to mend the fence, sharpen the shovel, measure depth so the earth stayed close tight. You whisper thanks into the dusk. Not words the village would understand, but the kind that need no reply. The wind moves through the youths overhead, their branches heavy with the weight of so many seasons spent watching. The graves lie quiet, no footsteps pacing the fence line but yours. Somewhere beyond the wall, laughter bubbles up from the tavern, thin, distant, yet carrying the soft reminder that the living go on as they must. And you, standing here with your boots pressed into the damp grass and your shovel resting at your side, are the hush that lets them do so. Neither curse nor ghosts, not entirely one of them, but never fully apart. You are the space between the breath and the earth, the one who listens when all other voices fall still. This is the solitude you tend as carefully as any grave, not an exile, but a vigil, a promise to the village that they may sleep while you walk the fence that keeps their dreams safe from what lies beneath. There are moments rare, but steady as seasons turning, when the village's careful distance thins just enough for you to see it for what it is. Not rejection, not really. Something closer to trust, shaped by the hush. They fear yet need so badly. It happens when the knock comes at your door in the dark hush before dawn. A soft, uncertain rapping, never too loud. As if they fear to wake whatever shadows sleep beside you. You rise from your straw pallet, tug your cloak around your shoulders, and open the latch to find them standing there. A child holding her father's hand, a young man shifting from foot to foot, a widow with tears catching in the lantern's edge of light. They do not always have words ready. They fumble for them, half whispers that start with your name, or sometimes just you. You know what we need, and you do. You stand aside, letting the hush of your small room hold them for a moment. They lay a coin on your table, or a loaf wrapped in cloth, or nothing at all, but their trembling gratitude. They do not stay. They do not linger over your heart, but in those breaths, they cross the fence you tend every day. The line between the living easy laughter and the quiet weight of what waits in the soil. You see it, too, in the women who come with a priest to the cottage where the dead lie waiting. They wash the body, hands dipping linen cloths into warm water scented with rosemary and rue. They hum to themselves, low and tuneless, fill in the room with something softer than silence. They glance at you sometimes, the way your father said they always did. Half wary, half grateful that when they have done all they can, you will take the burden the rest of the way. Sometimes, you stand in the corner, boots planted by the threshold, eyes lowered out of respect for grief's fragile shell. When they finish, they nod to you, stepping aside so you can bind the jaw, cross the limbs, tie the ropes that will hold the shroud closed when the earth claims what it must. No one teaches you these final gestures. They pass down through your palms, calloused and cracked, the way old songs travel by memory alone. And when the family follows behind you to the churchyard gate, their steps slow and uneven in the shifting dawn light, you feel it in the hush they carry. This is your place, not only in the digging, not only in the hush of the earth folding over the dead, but here, where the living must let go of what they love most, and need someone to bear the moment they cannot. You see, the priest's eyes catch yours across the grave, sometimes weary, sometimes grateful. He knows what you know, that the words he murmurs and the soil you lift are both needed in equal measure. One for the soul, one for the bones, one for the promise of heaven, one for the peace of those left behind. When the last handful of earth falls, you stand at the edge a moment longer than most. You tamp the mound smooth, set the cross or stone straight. You do not hurry the grieving. Even when the wind cuts through your cloak and the soil clings to your sleeves, you wait until they are ready to step away from the grave's edge, back into the lane where life picks up its soft, shuffling rhythm once more. Later you find the small signs they leave behind for you. A sprig of thyme tucked into the fence, post a candle stub set on the churchyard wall, its wax cooled into a puddle that catches the dusk's last light. They will not speak the thanks outright. They do not need to. You see it in the way they pause when they pass you in the lane, the way their eyes hold yours for a heartbeat longer than before. the smallest bridge built across the hush you boast tend in your own ways. In these moments, the solitude you carry feels less like a wall and more like a garden hedge, keeping the hush in its place while the living gather behind it, safe enough to sleep through the night without dreaming of open graves or restless souls. You are the keeper of that hedge, the watcher of the gate, the quiet promise that when fear presses close, someone will stand where the village cannot. At dusk, you trace your steps back along the boundary, boots pressing the earth flat where the foxes skitter through the grass. Your lantern flickers against the stone wall. The graves lie in soft rows, each mound a hush held safe beneath the sky's deepening blue. Beyond the fence, a mother calls a child in for supper. A dog barks once, then settles near a hearth you will never sit beside. You pause at your own threshold, hand resting on the latch, and glance once more at the fence line. It holds, as it must. The dead rest, the living breathe easy, just beyond your reach. And you, standing in that slender space between the worlds, are enough. By dawn, the village begins to stir again. The mist clings to thatched roofs, and the well yard carrying with it the soft hush of ordinary life. The bleat of sheep, the chatter of women hauling buckets, the iron ring of the blacksmith's hammer, far off by the crossroad. You watch it all from your place, by the fence, the shovel head resting on your boot, your breath turning to cloud in the cool air. Among these people you are neither rich nor truly poor, yet you belong to neither world. You stand outside their feasts and arguments. Your name, a half-whispered thing, in the shadows of both the peasant's hearth and the noble's hall. Death cares nothing for silver or straw. Its door opens just as wide for those who kneel before an altar in silks as it does for those who sleep for to a pallet of straw. When the highborn die, the hush feels heavier. The priest's robes gleam with their best threads. The bells toll longer, echoing down the lanes and out over the fields until the shepherds pause in their work to listen. The mourners come dressed in furs or fine wool, faces hidden behind scraps of black cloth that cannot truly hide the fear that flickers behind their eyes. You stand behind the priest, then your spade grip tight against your side boots, planted in the same mud that will soon cradle the bones of those whose names are written in ink. So fine, they curl like vines on old parchment. You dig no deeper for a baron than you do for a beggar. The earth knows no difference. But the watchers do. They do not thank you openly. Their eyes pass through you like a draft through an open door. But you see how they lean closer to each other when your shovel hits stone, how they cross themselves when you pause to wipe your breath. You hear the hush in their voices when they mutter, "Better him than me, better he know the hush than I." And you do. You hold it for them, this silence they cannot bear to carry home. Among the poor, the hush is simpler. They leave small gifts when they can. A crust of bread, an onion wrapped in cloth, a sprig of dried herbs slipped onto your doorstep. Sometimes they pay you with a meal. A bowl of thin broth, steam curling up from a chipped cup into the dusk of your small room. They linger a little longer when they see you coming, not because they wish to speak, but because they know that to see you is to remember what they have yet to lose. Children born on feast days still carry garlands to the graves of those they never met. You watch them weave through the crooked rows, plucking daisies from the ditch, tying them with bits of frayed string. They leave their small offerings by stones, so worn the names have bled back into the soil. You find these posies wilted by morning, petals damp with dew, and you clear them gently away when they rot. Each gesture a bridge, the living child and the long-gone soul sharing a breath through your careful hands. Even the priest, for all his grand Latin and the hush of the altar, sees you in the corner of his eye. Some days he stands beside you, robes brushing your sleeve as you brace your back to the shovels. Wait, he knows the shape of the hush as you do. The difference is only that he speaks of what comes after, while you tend what remains behind. There are days when his voice cracks at the graveside, when the words falter on his tongue, because the family kneeling in the damped grass has come to say farewell for the 4th time in a single year. Then, you stand a step closer, not to speak you never do, but to be the shape that does not bend the hush, that does not judge the promise that this last bed will be dug, deep closed, tight tended with care long after the wailing stops. At dusk a valley forgets its hush. Ale flows warm over tongues loosened by relief that, for now, the line holds. Shadows gather in corners where secrets trade hands for coin or gossip, but your name drifts only as an echo. He stands the line. He walks the fence. He keeps it quiet. No songs are sung for you. No children wrap garlands for your door. But when they light candles in the chapel, when they murmur prayers for souls already given to the earth, they think of you in the back of their minds, the man who makes certain the dead do not stir, the man who keeps their dreams undisturbed. You stand by your fence as the last warmth slips behind the yew trees. The moon climbs, gentle and pale as a polished coin. The graves lie quiet. The village hums beyond your reach, their fears forgotten, for now, folded away like winter cloaks hung behind cottage doors. And you, the gravedigger, neither king nor beggar, never quite inside nor out, stand at the threshold. The hush settles in your chest, soft and steady as breath. It is not a burden. It is not a curse. It is the price of the line you keep, price you pay with quiet hands, and all the patience the earth can hold. Segment 5, Part 1. Stories beneath the soiled graveyard holds its stories close, pressed deep beneath layers of clay and loam. You learn to read them, not by parchment or ink, but by the weight of your shovel. The hush of the earth when your blade bites down and strikes something that is not stone, not root, but bone. In the earliest light of dawn, the air still carries a cold dampness that clings to your sleeves. You stand over an old grave, the marker so worn by rain and wind that the name is little more than a pale shadow on the stone. The church record says one thing, the earth sometimes says another. You dig with care, your hands steady, the shovel cutting through soil that has settled for decades. It is here, in these quiet tasks, that you find the past pressing against your palm, a fragment of a skull, cupped like an empty bowl in the hollow you make, a tooth rolling free, white as chalk, older than the oldest living villager. Sometimes you pause, wiping your brow with your sleeve, and imagine the breath that once warmed these bones, a sigh lost to the same wind that now stirs the yew branches overhead. You have found old coins before, slipped into graves by wives or mothers whose faith held that silver might soothe her. Astony, some are tarnished green, edges worn smooth as river stones. You pocket none of them. Each coin returns to the earth, tucked back beside the bones that keep its story. You know better than to carry the past in your pockets. It belongs here, layered between root and stone, where even secrets find a kind of peace. Not all stories come from the earth's hush alone. Some drift down through the village like drifting ash from a fire long burned out. The old women tell you as they pass the fence, voices low, eyes on the graveyard gate. That mound there. Did you know they buried the smithess daughter with a lock of her hair wrapped in red thread? Said she might come back else, or dig near the western wall and you'll find the bones of a child born wrong, left unnamed. You listen, always. You do not ask if these tales are true. The graveyard is full of stories half true and half imagined, each given shape by the fear and hope that linger when breath leaves the body but love remains behind. You give them room. You tend them with the same patience you give the soil. There are moments when a secret comes to light unbidden. You remember one winter when the earth, frozen hard as stone, forced you to build a small fire above a patch of ground so the frost would loosen its hold. When the soil softened, your shovel struck a board you did not expect. Beneath it, bones lay tangled together. Two shapes wrapped in each other so tightly that even the roots curled shyly around them, giving them space to hold their final embrace. You closed that grave with care, your breath catching in your throat as you pressed the soil back down, your fingers tracing the outline of their story, though no tongue alive could tell it now. You marked the spot with a single stone, no name carved, no date recorded, just a hush, given back to the earth. Sometimes you find fragments that seem to whisper of the world they left behind, a shard of pottery tucked near a wrist bone, a scrap of cloth turned to dust. But for the faint shape of stitches that once held it together, you hold these pieces gently, turning them in your calloused palm, feeling the fragile line between what was and what is, and what waits for you, too, when your own shovel falls silent. By dusk, you rest your tools against the fence, the scent of fresh earth still clinging to your hair and cuffs. The mounds lie quiet, the stones lean into the coming dark, and the secrets of the soil slip back beneath the hush like fish vanishing beneath a still pond. You stand at the gate, eyes drifting across the crooked rows, and feel a strange comfort settle in your bones. One day, you will lie here too. Beneath this same earth you have turned 1,000 times, your name etched shallow into a stone that rain and wind will one day smooth away. There is no fear in that thought, only the hush you know so well. The hush that holds all stories, all secrets, pressed close in the dark. And so you shoulder your shovel, your boots whispering against the graveyard grass, and turn back to your small dwelling. Behind you, the graveyard breathes. A garden of stories, quiet and patient, waiting to welcome you home when your own tale finds its final line. When you sleep, when your shovel rests by the hearth and the candle flickers low against the rough plank walls, the graveyard does not leave you entirely. It follows you, the hush threading through your dreams like a root winding deep under soft clay. Some nights the dreams are simple. You stand among the mounds, lantern swinging from your hand, the flame casting gold over names, half-eaten by moss. You pause at each grave, your palm resting against the stones as if the cold might speak to you. The earth sighs in your dream, not with fear, but with a slow, patient warmth, as if it knows you, welcomes you as both keeper and guest. Other nights, the stories you have unearthed drift through your sleep like smoke. The couple wrapped together beneath that hidden board near the frozen pasture. In dreams, you see their shadows walking side by side among the yews, their fingers entwined, no longer worried about who might find them. They do not look at you, yet you feel a quiet thank you in the hush that follows their passing. You see the unnamed child, buried near the western wall where the soil dips low after each spring thaw. He runs through your dreams barefoot, trailing wildflowers behind him. The laughter that should have filled a cottage now soft as the wind rattling the fence slats outside. When you wake, you sometimes find your hand stretched out, palm open as if to catch his tiny shadow before it slips back beneath the grass. Not all dreams bring comfort. You know this too. There are nights when the hush curls tight around your chest like the damp weight of the fog that clings to the graveyard gate at dawn. You see the faces of the plague's restless dead, not because they come to haunt you, but because they never truly left. They linger in your blood, in the blisters on your palms, in the ache of your shoulders when you rise before dawn. They ask nothing of you, they need nothing more, but they remind you that your place here is earned each day you stand between the living and the soil. And yet, even these darker dreams bring no terror. You have spent too many nights alone under the moon's pale gaze, your shovel blade catching starlight as you checked the mounds for signs of restless stirring. You have heard the stories of the revenants' bodies that claw their way through shallow earth, but you have never turned your back on the hush that answers your footsteps when you make your rounds. You wake before the rooster calls, the dream's edge still clinging to your hair and sleeves like a dusting of soil. You stretch your legs, feeling the cold bite through the cracks in your cottage walls, and let the hush settle back into its place inside you. The hush is never gone. It simply rests, the way the village rests, while you shoulder the weight of what they dare not speak. Sometimes, as the candle gutters out, you imagine how your own mound might look when your hands grow too weak to lift the spade. You see it in your mind, SI. A simple plot near the yew where your father lies. No grandstone, just a marker cut from whatever board you have left behind. Perhaps a sprig of rosemary tucked into the soil by someone who remembers you as more than a shadow on the path. Perhaps not. It does not matter. You find a strange peace in that vision, not of death itself, but of joining the hush you have tended all your life, becoming part of the same earth you have turned 1,000 times, your bones pressing stories into clay that no one living will ever quite recall, yet which linger all the same, patient as the graveyard's breath at dusk. The villagers may not dream of you. They will not speak your name when they lift their cups in the warmth of the tavern, but in the hush behind their shuttered windows, in the sleep made easy by the fence you walk and the earth you close tight, they carry you, unknowingly, in the space between one breath and the next. When the dawn comes, you gather your tools again. Your boots sink into the soft dew of the graveyard path. Your fingers close around the handle that fits so perfectly to the lines of your palm. You stand among the mounds, the hush of your dreams echoing in the still air, and you feel it. The stories resting beneath, you the old secrets pressing up from the clay. A promise that when you are ready, they will welcome you too. And so, you dig, you tamp the soil, you smooth the earth with careful hands. The hush folds over you like a blanket, warm as breath against your chest. In this place, between the living and the lost, your dreams and waking hours blur together, and you find your belonging there, steady as stone, soft as the soil that waits to cradle your bones. In the graveyard, the wind carries secrets from one mound to the next. You feel it slip across your shoulders as you stand with your boots pressed into damp grass, shovel resting in the crook of your elbow. It whispers in the dry rattle of yew branches, sighs through the leaning stones where names are lost to moss and rain. Some secrets stay buried forever. A bent nail pressed into a shroud by trembling hands, never spoken of again. A locket clasped in cold fingers, its chain so thin it snaps when your spade brushes the edge of the coffin years later. You hold these pieces gently, turn them over in your palm, then lay them back down where they belong. You know that the hush remembers them when no one else does. You've seen how stories fade like candle smoke. The plague pit at the pasture's edge, once a raw wound in the earth, ringed with weeping faces and half-finished prayers, is now just a gentle rise of grass. Children walk their sheep over it without a thought. Lovers meet by the old fence that marks where it was, their laughter carrying over what lies below. You do not begrudge them that forgetfulness. You think, perhaps, the dead do not either. Your father used to say that memory is not always kind. Let the hush carry what you cannot, he told you once, his breath warm with ale and the scent of damp earth. It holds the bitterness same as the love, the worry same as the mercy. You have carried those words the way you carry your shovel, always at your side, always ready. So you tend the hush, each grave you dig, each stone you straighten, each weed you pull from a forgotten mound. These are your prayers, given without words. You know they matter, even when the village pretends not to see. You know because you see the way they linger at the gate when they think you do not watch. Eyes drifting across the mounds, lips moving around names they only half remember. They leave small offerings, too, though they rarely claim them aloud. A scrap of bread left on the chapel step, a candle stub pressed into a hollow in the stone wall. These gifts hold no coins, weight, yet they buy peace all the same. Not for the dead, but for those who fear the night's hush might spill over into their dreams. Sometimes, you find a grave that sinks more than it should, a hollow like a breath held too long. You kneel there, palms pressed to the cold clay, and you listen. You do not expect to hear voices. You listen for the simple truth of the soil, the way it shifts, the way it remembers, the shape of what lies beneath. You pack it firm again, smoothing the mound, tucking the hush tight like a blanket around old bones that no longer mind the weight. In these moments, you feel your own story folding in among theirs. You do not pretend you are separate from what you tend. You have no illusions that your bones will rest anywhere else when your breath runs out. And when that day comes, you hope only that whoever stands where you now stand will take the same care, that they too will feel the hush settle soft around your name whether it is spoken or lost to the wind. When you walk the graveyard's edge at dusk, the wind at your back, you do not feel lonely. You feel the hush like a low hum in your chest, patient, old, never greedy. It wants nothing but the stories you've given it, folded layer by layer into the soil. It promises nothing but the soft weight of earth pressing close when your work is done. Beyond the fence, the village closes its shutters, children curl into straw beds, mothers hush their sons' fears of shadows at the window. They sleep well, not because they have conquered death, but because they know someone stands here in the hush, someone who keeps watch so they need not think of what lies beneath. And so you lean your shovel against the fence, your boots coated in the scent of damp clay and crushed grass, your breath warm in the gathering dark. You run your hand along the old boards, feeling each knot and splinter as if it were the spine of a book you've read 1,000 times. You do not know every name buried here. You never will. But, the hush remembers. The hush forgives what memory forgets. And one day, it will remember you, too, when all your work is done. The mounds tended, the fence mended, the lantern flame guttering in the soft cradle of your palm. You stand once more at the gate. Beyond its weathered posts, the village lights blink awake in the dark like a scattering of low stars. Smoke drifts from the chimneys, carrying the warmth of bread and broth. Laughter and the soft creak of old songs traded over cups of ale. They speak of you sometimes, voices lowered behind shutters when the wind carries your name down the lane. They say your boots track the graveyard into their dreams, that your shadow brushes their windows when the night grows thin and restless. But they sleep, and that is what matters. They sleep because you walk the fence when they cannot. They sleep because your hands shape the hush into something they need not fear. You watch them through the dusk, a father closing the latch on his door, a mother settling a restless child beneath a wool blanket, the priest's pale candle flickering behind the chapel's cracked panes. You see them all, and though they will not call you kin, this is family enough to stand between them and the dark they cannot bear alone. One day, when your spine bends fully to the weight of the earth, you will lay your shovel down for the last time. No great procession will wind through the village for you. No feast laid on the trestle table. Perhaps a handful will gather by your grave. The priest, the widow who left bread at your door in lean years, the child now grown who once dared to touch your coat hem as you passed. They will stand by the yew where your father waits in the hush, The same hush you have tended like a garden all these seasons. The same hush that has known your sweat and the echo of your boots pressing down its secrets. They will lower you into the soil you turned for so many others. The line will hold, as it always has. The hush will close around your bones with the soft patience you once gave to every grave, and in that quiet you will find no fear, only belonging. The hush folding your story in with all the others. The miller's child, the old priest, the lovers buried under the frost line, the mother whose hands pressed rosemary into the folds of her husband's shroud. Each one a thread in the dark gloom of the earth, each one held steady by the same silence that keeps the living dreaming sweet and untroubled through the night. You lean on the fence one last time, your lantern flame a tiny star in the thickening dark. The graves behind you lie calm, each mound a gentle promise that the dead are tended. The line is walked, the door closed tight. The hush slips into your chest, soft as breath, warm as the hearth you do not need. You lift your head toward the village, its shapes blurred now by the drifting fog, the hush deeper than any story you have ever been told. And you stand there, at the quiet edge of both worlds, the keeper of the line, the dreamer who walks where others will not. When you close your eyes, you feel the hush carry you to a promise. Rest easy, sleep deep. The earth remembers, the line holds. Conclusion. The hush you come home to when your hands have grown raw from the shovel's handle, when the clay clinks stubbornly to your boots, no matter how many times you scrape them clean, when the wind rattles. The shutters of your small cottage in the graveyard behind your door hums with the hush of 100 untold stories. That is when you understand the truth. This life, this place at the edge of the village, is not only about tending to the dead, it is about tending to the living, too. You are the keeper of the line they dare not cross. They do not say your name in their prayers at the chapel. They do not lay out feasts for you, or fold you into their warm gossip. But when the night comes, the kind that makes old shutters creak and children huddle closer under blankets, they sleep more deeply knowing you stand at the fence, boots pressed into soft earth, lantern swinging gently, its glow a star against the dark. You have learned every sound the soil can make, the quiet sigh when rain softens a fresh grave, the hush that settles over old bones laid down so long ago that the roots of the yew weave through them like threads in a forgotten loom. You know the scrape of your father's shovel, the way his voice lived on in the stories of graves dug to shallow, of restless souls made peaceful by care and depth and patience. You learnt, in time, that the hush carries more than fear. It holds forgiveness for things never spoken aloud. It cradles the secrets that might have burned someone's name from the village's lips if they'd been known in the daylight. It gathers every kindness too small for memory. A coin tucked into a cold palm, a charm hidden in a shroud, a mother's tear brushed from a child's brow before the soil claimed what breath left behind. You walk alone more often than not. Past the leaning stones, past the grave of the smith's daughter whose locket you reburied when the spring flood unearthed it, past the trench that held the plague's restless tide when the world seemed too small to bear so much loss. Your boots leave prints the wind will erase by morning, but you do not mind. You walk so they do not have to. And still, there are moments, soft as the drift of snow against your cottage roof, when you see that they remember you too. A bundle of herbs on your doorstep when your cough will not loosen. A candle left burning at the gate, its flame a hush of warmth in the frost. A bowl of broth pressed into your hands by someone who cannot look you in the eye but says, in that small offering, thank you for standing where I could not. When sleep comes for you, when your own bones grow tired of pressing your shape into the clay, you will lay your shovel by the hearth for the final time. There will be no procession, no priest singing your name through the rafters, no feast to mark your passing, but there will be a grave dug deep beneath the yew where your father waits, the hush curling around your bones like a warm blanket at the end of a long day. The village will carry on, as it must. Children laughing at the well, lovers whispering by the fence that keeps the hush at bay. They will sleep sweetly, not remembering the hands that closed the door behind them every night they lay, their heads down free of worry for what stirred in the soil. They will not know how carefully you tended their secrets, how gently you wrapped their stories in the hush when they could no longer bear them alone. And that will be enough, because the hush does not forget. It holds every name, even those worn smooth by rain and time. Even yours when it becomes no more than a breath on the wind curling through the crooked rows of stones. It holds the soft promise that when you stand at the gate for the last time, it will open for you as it did for all the others. Patient, wide, familiar. So let your dreams drift now through the graveyard paths, past the leaning crosses, past the fence you mended each spring, past the trench and the single stone that marks a secret no tongue remembers. Let the hush cradle you, the hush you tended all these years, and know that in the end, when breath and memory slip away like candle smoke, you are part of it too. Rest easy, sleep deep. The hush is wide enough for every story, and you are home. Final thoughts, the quiet gift of the hush one. You think back on this path you've walked, this long, slow journey through shadowed rows of stone and soil. You might wonder how you ever could have lasted even a single day. The weight of the spade in your hands, the raw clay clinging under your nails, the silent trust the living gave you, even as they stepped wide of your shadow in the lane. And yet, in that hard hush you found something that many never do, a place to stand when fear pushes others away, a promise that even the smallest life will be given a place to rest, a simple dignity, where the rich and poor lie side by side beneath the same patient earth. It is not an easy place, this threshold you tend. It asks more than sweat from your shoulders. It asks you to bear the stories that the village cannot hold, to know that every grave is a final kindness, to walk alone in the dark so that others can sleep without the taste of the hush in their dreams. But see what you gave in return. A fence that holds back fear, a spade that closes the door no one else dares shut, a watchful eye that keeps the hush from spilling too far into the warmth of their hearths. And in that quiet work, you belong, more truly than if your name were carved in gold or sung in the chapel. The hush remembers, even when the living forget. The hush keeps every secret pressed close like roots winding through bone. The hush knows your bootprints on the path, the callus on your palm, the soft prayer you never spoke aloud. Rest easy, sleep deep, trouble them no more. So if ever you wake in the night and think on this story, let its hush remind you of what your labor means. That tending to the endings is itself an act of mercy. That, even the smallest kindness, a grave dug deep, a stone set straight, a wild flower laid on a mound, ripples out beyond what eyes can see. That when your own breath slows and your name slips through the earth, you will not be alone. You will lie in the hush you helped keep gentle for so many others. And in that dark, rich soil, your story will soften into the great hush that holds every tale. Long after candles burn out, long after the gate swings open for the next tired soul. Sleep now, Gravedigger. The hush stands where you stood, the fence holds firm, the village sleeps, and you, keeper of the hush, you are part of it now.